IT right now is kind of in the dumpster. Like it is a little bit of there's not a lot of trust for it, and people are just kind of looking elsewhere for their inspiration and innovation.
Welcome to the Enterprise Intelligence Podcast with CEO Shiny Docs Jason Cassidy and VP Customer Success Davy Slimman. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Doing pretty good, sitting outside, enjoying a nice summer day that's not sweltering hot. So I am delighted.
Yeah, I feel left out. You're both outside.
2 for 3 outside. In my case, I'm outside not only because it's lovely outside, but I've got family visiting from out of town, and so the house inside is kind of chaos, and I'm in the cheap tranquility of nature.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome. So I figure I'll just jump right into it this week. So CloudStrike has obviously been in the news a lot, and Windows infinite reboot loops because of that, 8 million computers. And the thing that I didn't really want to pick on CloudStrike, because this could happen to anybody. You push out a bad update, and then it causes catastrophic problems. It's just more about as we had prophesized years ago, Davey and I, when we were talking about this, and we're talking about this centralization and cloud and that. And again, I'm not specifically anti-cloud, but everybody had this cloud first strategy because it was supposed to be 10 times cheaper, 10 times more reliable. And here's another example where what is reliable is when you do have centralized ability to push out things to 8 million computers, you guarantee that everybody fails at the same time.
Right.
Whereas back in the olden days, when people upgraded whenever they upgraded their on-prem systems, or whenever IT decided to upgrade, then if they went offline, whoever went first notified the rest of the world, say, don't do this update, and then nobody did the update, and then Microsoft or CloudStrike or anybody would do the patch, and then you would just skip a patch, and then you would move on to the next one. So this whole consolidation, monopolization of the web is, again, like the 10 times cheaper failed. Now 10 times more reliable is failing. In fact, it's the opposite. It's 10 times more likely that you're going to fail because of the centralization of these services. I posit to you, Davy Slimman.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like 100%. The thing that it reminds me a little bit about it, I'm not a war history buff, but I've got this weird niche interest in the Flying Fortress stuff, the B-52 bombers, the Lancashire bombers, and the like. And one of the things that was the Lancaster bombers. One of the things that was so problematic about in World War II, when those planes would go down, it was like 100% attrition. There was no, they would go down and the entire crew would be lost each time. And so, I know I kind of went to a bit of a dark place there, but to your point, when one of these events occurs, it's not taking one organization out of the action for a few hours or a day. It's taking nations and broad strokes of geography around the world out of action, entire industries. And so, yeah, the appeal of going to these cloud solutions, if it's not cheaper and it's not more reliable and it's causing disruption at this level, go on, tell me what the advantages are. And I think they still argue that you're simplifying the procurement of these services. I think that's starting to become a pretty weak set of arguments. I think that was the one, in addition to the promise of it being cheaper. I think that the appeal of cloud, one of the selling points for so long, was the simplification of its procurement, particularly the transition from CapEx to OpEx spending, a subscription that you pay for every month or pay based on utilization or whatever it is. I think that's like one of the last dominoes that's still kind of upright, but it's also linked into the problem of it probably not being cheaper, because sure, your monthly bill feels smaller, but in aggregate over time, is it cheaper? No. And if it's not as reliable, good grief, yeah.
Yeah, like it's just it stacks up as another piece of this. Last week we were talking a lot about, kind of there's a mistrust now for IT, and
Mhm.
it's like we don't know what the next big thing is. Like we talked about quantum and AI and all
Yep.
that, but I mean it's those 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 things are kind of big nothing burgers right now as far as truly transforming industry the way that everybody anticipated. And now, yeah, with these centralized services now faltering and bringing people offline en masse, it is just, yeah, it's like IT right now is kind of in the dumpster. Like it is a
Mhm.
little bit of there's not a lot of trust for it, and people are just kind of looking elsewhere for their inspiration and innovation, because it seems like everything that IT touches these days is
Is a
like
problem.
there's not, yeah, there's not a lot of thanks IT because you gave me my
Right.
amazing phone. Thanks IT because I got this new capability. It feels like there's none of that right now, but there's like the downside
Only
is still
security,
still out there.
privacy, reliability, safety, human safety, right? So you're right. It's a
Hmm.
lot of, it's kind of bad news story after bad news story right now, and not. Thank God for our incredible, IT teams and the incredible outcomes that they're driving in our business, and the innovation that they're bringing. Yeah, it's kind of, unfortunately, kind of bad news story after bad news story. Yeah, I think you're right. Like we're in a bit of a funk, and I don't know whether that's just something that relates to the maturity of IT at this point, right? So we haven't, you and I and Steve, to a lesser extent, you're much younger than us, but we've lived through, from the time when we were each born to today, which for Jason and I is a heck of a long time. We've lived through a remarkable kind of revolution in computing, from where it was when you and I were born, Jason, before we even knew what a computer was. But there would have been, punch card computers maybe in your city hall, maybe your, some government office that your dad or mom interacted with might have had a computer, a super, some kind of reel to reel something or other. That maybe existed when we were kids, to where we are today. And it is obviously so clearly pervasive in everything that we do and everywhere we go, on our phones, on our watches, in our wallets, and everywhere we go. The maturity of where we've come to in that half decade, because it's about a half decade that I'm talking about, has obviously leveled the playing field for so many individuals and organizations and countries. But it's also now gotten to a point of maturity where it feels like diminishing returns. Right there has not truly been, in my view, there has not truly been a giant leap since smartphones. Truly, um, and some things kind of happened simultaneously. I would say cloud and smartphones were kind of in tandem with one another. And and how long have we been realistically been using smartphones? If you think of kind of the original Blackberries and into the iPhones, it's 15, 20 years.
Yeah, oh for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Since I got my first BlackBerry pager, it's a long time, and the what was one thing that kind of just we skipped over was the amazing bandwidth that we have
mm,
now coming into your
we did.
home and into your businesses and that type of thing. And the problem with it is we just got kind of fat and inefficient as opposed to benefiting from it. It reminds me of like back in the olden days when I first started writing code, you did your own memory management.
Yep.
you were very careful about the resources that you used because your computer would just run out of resources immediately if you weren't careful. Whereas now there's so many resources, you don't have to be as careful.
Yep.
Your computer will run out of resources, but it'll be a day or two after your app has started running as opposed to immediately. And so, yeah, it's what I've seen with respect to bandwidth is it's like it allows people to be lazy. Everything just soaks up a ton of bandwidth, and yeah, we're less worried about compression, we're less worried about optimization, and everything's 4K for no good reason. Like it's just everything just gets bigger and fatter to soak up this pipe instead of actually experiencing something that's truly remarkable, the super fast connectivity that we have that allows for us to do real-time video and all these things that were unimaginable back in 1999. It's back when we were doing 320 by 200 video streaming, and we thought that was amazing.
The bee's knees.
And now, yeah, for sure. Now there's like 4K streaming where you can see the nose hair on the golfer when you're watching sports on the weekend or whatever. Like so all we did was just kind of destroyed the innovation that was this faster connectivity because we just soaked it up with junk. So anyway, I don't want this to be overly negative, but it's just it's weird that we can't have nice things right now because like the innovations that we have keep sidestepping these silly things. So instead of letting the higher bandwidth be a benefit, we just soak it up with junk. Instead of letting centralization and cloud be more efficient, it's like we don't mitigate the centralized risk associated with it, and like there's all sorts of funny things that it's one step forward, two steps back with a lot of these technological wonder advances that we have.
Is it? Do you think? Is it that everybody actually behind the scenes, again, not picking on CrowdStrike, but major cloud vendors, for example, is it that they actually know everything? They know everything that we've just said. They understand everything that we just said, and what they've decided is we don't care. Like we'll deal with it later. Oh yeah, no, totally. This is all going to fall down and sink into the swamp. We don't care because that's not what's important. What's important is we bring in as much money as we possibly can, get as many customers locked in as we possibly can, and when it falls down and sinks into the swamp, we'll deal with it then. And I don't know, probably.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's the focus when you become a big company is to become a monopoly.
Right.
And we've heard the term shitification before. It was like the word of the year from a couple of years ago, and it accurately describes the instant something becomes a monopoly, then all of a sudden their users, instead of being the customers, become the product. And you get more money by degrading the value to your users by selling your users to other vendors who want to either advertise to them or exploit them in some other way. And I'm not saying that that's what CloudStrike did by any stretch. However, it is did CloudStrike, were they overly concerned about the fact that a push of a broken technology was going to break everybody? Of course they knew that could happen. Did the CEO want it to happen? No. But he and everybody else knew it was an obvious risk that they were happy to take because lots of people use them. They got 8 million customers. I don't have 8 million customers. I'd love to have 8 million customers. And then
do you think
the whole goal
do you think they'll continue to have 8 million customers?
No, for sure. It is. These things are tough to bounce back from when, like Rogers, for example, in Canada, that was fine because they, you're a monopoly of 3 big telcos in Canada. So
where else are you going to go?
Yeah, that's easier to rebound. But CloudStrike's one of like 20 vendors that do that. So I have a funny, remember the virtual machines that got exploited with LastPass, I think it was. And everybody exodus from LastPass. And I don't know if they truly recovered. I don't know if they published their numbers or anything like that, but that was pretty devastating for them. We'll see for CloudStrike. Maybe they'll give everybody a free month or whatever and it'll all blow over. But I have a funny feeling it might be a bigger hit than that.
Yeah, or you end up seeing, if not the annihilation of these companies from a market cap perspective, uh, the breakup, right? So we're gonna yeah, we had this problem, made a lot of news last year, but that part of the business we sold off to somebody else. We're the new CrowdStrike, and you know it becomes
Maybe.
this, who knows? But yeah,
Well, yeah. And I feel like we keep backing up and punching this poor problem from different angles. Like even a different angle is they talk about Mac users and Linux users all snickering
yeah,
at this is that and don't get me wrong, like it's Linux can be exploited, Macs can be
sure,
exploited, so can Windows, and they can all fail. Like kernel panic is a real thing on Linux that can
sure,
happen, and
yeah,
that's fine. But yeah, like it's the issue. The issue, as I see it, is more about the fact that from a security perspective, from a capability perspective, you talk about zero trust, and you want to have the minimum surface area for everything for your computers, so that you have less things that can go wrong. And that generally is the Linux approach for things,
yeah,
is that you come with some bare bones thing and you just add up to what you need to do your job, and that's it. Nothing else gets added to it.
yeah.
Whereas Windows has the bloatware and all this other kind of stuff, and it's never really shaken that legacy. So anyway, it's yet another thing that all IT people know. Oh, we've centralized everything. We allow everybody to install whatever they want, and we continue to have failures when deep down we know what the solution is, but we just keep not doing it as a society.
Well, and hilariously, or I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Hilariously, if you go way, way back, before, even certainly before my time, and you think about DARPANet and where this came from, it came from the value of a distributed network where things are not centralized, so that in the
Hmm.
event of, in that case, nuclear war, the nation and the industrialized nations of the world would be able to continue to be able to communicate with each other through web uh, this web network of distributed computers talking to each other, not a centralized single point of failure where if one thing breaks. So I mean, there's the irony on this is just palpable. But anyway, you know,
Hmm. It is, yeah, it's amazing because it's, yeah, like you start off with something, and I think that kind of is right aligned with the point. You start off with something that is architected actually with the right intent, and then you squeeze it back to a monopoly. It's like it's just, yeah, you take something that like the algorithm of the internet is genius. Is like it's the packet comes from my computer to the router. All the router knows is it something for me or
yep,
not? If it's not for me, I throw it out into the network. If it's for me, then I route it to the right
yeah,
computer.
it's
And
genius.
that makes the entire internet work. But that's the opposite of a monopoly.
Yeah,
It's monopoly means everything's for me. I control everything. And yeah, so the commercial interests are antithetical to the interests of, bomb proofing your network.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah.
we could beat that to death, but I think that's a good point.
All I can think about now is the arguments that I've had over the years. Well, not arguments; they were actually lively, exciting conversations that I've had with sysadmins and network folks that have been clinging and clinging and clinging to their Unix boxes, and we're looking for help and ammunition from me and places that I've worked to support the ongoing use of Unix machines over Windows, and for the most part, with some exceptions, that ended up being a bit of a losing battle, and most organizations at some point had decided that they want to move away from Unix boxes and things. And anyway, it's, again, not to single any particular company out. I think these are just unfortunately larger trends that have been allowed to happen from the point of view of convenience and comfort. And your comment about bandwidth in particular and just pipeline is super relevant. And the fact that we aren't asked to be economical in our use of these resources, right? So, designing programs that use memory responsibly and, use only what you need, right? That's not in our DNA, unfortunately. And I think, to build on top of that, I think of, I'm lucky enough. My niece is visiting from out of town, and she has a partner, young fella who's an engineer at the University of Waterloo. And I've had a couple of chats, and we talk a little bit about the way software is developed and that kind of thing. And there are whole swaths of learning that I think just aren't really taught anymore, because they're believed to be solved problems or things that you don't need to worry about. And, memory, your example of memory management is a good one, but, you're not led to believe that this is a problem that needs fixing. So why would you devote why would you devote any cycles to it? There's lots of resources, there's lots of memory, there's lots of CPU, there's lots of space. I can just go and build the cool thing that I want to build and not worry about that stuff. And I think that's unfortunately a bit of a mistake. So, yeah.
Awesome. I hope your topic is more uplifting. That one was.
I love when this happens, and it's not actually that surprising given the kind of impact of the issue that happened last week. It was obviously global news. I didn't actually intend to come with a take on CrowdStrike in particular, but rather the CrowdStrike thing did get me kind of connecting a couple things in my head. And this will be temporarily lighter, and then we'll decide whether it goes to a darker place. But my wife, I don't know whether this is the same for you guys, but my wife starts every one of her days with about an hour of 100 different little games that she plays. There's Wordle and Quirtle and all, like 9,000 flavors of Wordle. And then there's this other game that she plays, which I think is a New York Times game called Connections. You guys heard of Connections? It's this game. And she starts she's like, her day cannot begin until she's played all of these games. And one of the things that she's really enjoyed is she's been playing Connections with a colleague of hers who is just at the start of her career. She's a young woman who's, I don't know, probably in her mid-20s or something like that, but very early in her career. But they play Connections together. And I don't know how Connections works, but it's a whole idea of, there are a whole bunch of words and concepts, and you kind of have to cluster them together. So the words might be hammer, nails, 2x4. It's like, oh, these are tools, or whatever. And then you do that, I think, 3 or 4 times, and then when you put all 3 or 4 of them together, there's some larger meaning. Anyway, it doesn't matter how Connections works. What matters is this story recently that my wife relayed to me, where she said, "Yeah, I was playing with so and so, and she got all the right answers, but she was a little confused because she said afterwards to my wife, I got those answers right, but there were some of those things I don't know what these are. And so she said to my wife, 'What's a want ad?'" And of course, Ariane just kind of laughed and said, "Well, there used to be this thing called newspapers. You know what a newspaper? Yeah, of course I know what a newspaper is. Well, if you wanted a job, you would go to the store, you'd get a newspaper, and you'd go to the want ad section, and that would be where you might find, a job posting or that kind of thing." And I think I absolutely remember that, going to the classified section of the paper. And she goes, "Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. What's a personal ad?" And, and so again, same thing. Now this is somebody who's this young person is somebody that absolutely does, online dating and is familiar with online dating, but wouldn't have known what a personal ad is. This is, I promise I'm getting to the kind of connection, no pun intended, to the connection to CrowdStrike and everything that's going on. It got me thinking a lot about business continuity and disaster recovery type stuff. And so more business continuity. So if you're an airline and something like the CrowdStrike thing happens, and you've got hundreds of people showing up at your gate and they want to get on their airplanes, and the airplanes aren't sure whether they can take off, and all this stuff, and all these things are happening, do you have any capability whatsoever to do things the old way, like want ads and personal ads? Do you have any ability whatsoever for your business to carry on doing the things that it needs to do until such time that the super awesome computer cloud stuff comes back online? And if you don't, that's a real problem. And I've over the course of my career, I've been involved with a few organizations that have had certainly DR plans, worked on customers with disaster recovery plans and business continuity planning. But interestingly enough, I don't feel that any of them that I can honestly recall are operational enough to create a fully seamless, our thing that we rely on so much has vanished. It's disappeared. Our computers are off. None of them are sophisticated enough to say, that's cool, we've got an entire method and an entire process that everybody's trained on that'll allow us to do all the same work. It'll be a little slower, but maybe not all the same work, the essential work, but it'll be a little slower, but it'll still allow us to collect money. It'll still allow us to pay people. And I think that's a part of the giant problem around this stuff, and one of the things that I think organizations really need to consider. Instead, what I think they do with their BR and business continuity planning and their disaster recovery planning is, there's a cataclysmic thing that happens, and people, not us, will be involved in the fixing of the cataclysmic thing. And in the meantime, we just have to wait until it's fixed, and then we're going to resume business and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm kind of answering my own question, but I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. Obviously the cost and the time and the training and the drilling into people is what prevents this from meaningfully happening. That, you can't have two parallel systems running together. But can you imagine if you were, I don't want to single them out, but I'm going to do it anyway. Can you imagine if you were Porter Airlines, which was absolutely impacted here in Canada by the CrowdStrike thing? Can you imagine if you were Porter Airlines, and instead of having everybody show up at your gate and saying, oh, geez, yeah, our computers don't work, I guess you guys aren't flying today. Can you imagine what that would have been like if you were able to, as an organization, say, yep, we were absolutely impacted by CrowdStrike. Yes, it's absolutely a problem. It didn't affect our service whatsoever because we have this entire other channel that allows us to get stuff done that needs to get done. And what the value of that would be to the kind of esteem with which your organization was held,
Well, I saw some tweets from companies, and I don't know whether they're joking or not, but they said everybody laughed at us because we're still running Windows 3.1 for our whatever, but who's laughing now? You can board your flight now. Like and it's kind of funny.
Yep.
Like it's
Yep.
yep. And
was that real? Or there were
that is a real anecdote that's
Mhm.
out there. Whether or not this company was just joking around or not, I don't
Right.
know. But it brings up a good point. And one of the a classic issue that I have that's associated with this is nobody is empowered anymore anyway to do something reasonable. Like Porter Airlines, who's great by the
Yeah,
way.
of course.
Let's not pick on him too hard.
Yeah.
But everybody still had their cell phone, right?
Yep.
And somebody still had access to something. So imagine that each gate person just phoned so-and-so in IT and said, send me the Excel spreadsheet of everybody who should be boarding this plane.
Yeah, and I'll let them on.
Because the plane's fine. Guaranteed
Yeah.
the plane's fine.
Yeah.
It's not running it's CloudStrike on Windows.
Right.
It'll be fine. So if the person at the gate had an Excel spreadsheet and just checked, okay, the passengers versus the Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they could have boarded the flight, off they go, everything would be fine.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like nobody's even empowered to do that kind of thing. Nobody can make a decision anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's would they even know how to make a decision anymore? Like, it's my job is to make sure that the person touches their passport to this screen here.
That's
Well, what does that do? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It does magic.
I do the thing where I ask them to touch their passport to the screen reader. That's what I was trained on. Yeah. I think you're onto something, and worse than that, that if people were to stick their necks out for that kind of thing, they'd probably get their knuckles, wrapped for, going out, painting outside the lines, right? Your job is not to paint outside the lines. It's to make sure that everybody's boarding pass is swiped somehow or something. Again, the airline stuff being just sort of one example. It's funny to me, and this is again one of these things that the luxury of having worked for so long in this field, you get to, you live long enough, you get to see yourself become the bad guy. But when I was younger and earlier in my career, I used to get really frustrated and kind of confused and frustrated with customers that wouldn't upgrade. It's kind of a classic thing. It's like, oh, come on, guys, why are you hanging around on this old stuff? And we've released 15 new versions since you guys installed, and it's awesome. We got all kinds of new buttons and all kinds of new features, and you really should upgrade, because we don't, in the background, it's like, well, we don't want to keep supporting this old version. We want to support the new version, and the developers are saying they won't fix anything any older than 24 months or 18 months or whatever it is. And what I would hear from customers all the time, and it's sort of tying it into Nigel Tufnell and Spinal Tap, is like, it's working. Don't touch it. Don't look at it. Just don't even, we've got that server running. It's running fast. It's running well. It's doing exactly what we want it to. We are not going to change it, because if you change it, it's going to stop working and it's going to stop being awesome. And, and no amount of kind of saying, no, it's going to be great and it's going to be faster and better and more secure and all these other things. And of course, in some cases that is true, but, no amount of convincing them could get them to upgrade until it was, until they were clawed into it at the last minute. So, to your point, like who's laughing then in those situations when things go south and you've got this perfect machine that kind of just keeps humming along. So.
Yeah, it's like there's something to that, and I mean, there's so many different angles to do this. Like why do we have different, like, okay, let's pick on Microsoft. They're an easy target. It's like, why do we have different versions of Windows that are dramatically different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like,
it's Windows 8 sucked. Windows 7 pretty good. Windows XP pretty good. Windows Millennium terrible. Like, it's weird that they alternate and have different versions of things. Like, when you're on something that works really well, like, try to stick with the thing that works really well, little tweaks and all that. But no, we need to do something dramatic. We need to force an upgrade on the world. And then it forces everybody else to upgrade. And then it forces this divide between the people who want to stay on the thing that just works, the Spinal Tap amplification setup, versus the new thing that everybody has to buy. It is interesting. So at some point, anyway, I think we're almost today, we're enumerating, like, if you're going to make progress, remember these fundamental principles. It's like, do not have single points of failure.
Yep.
Ensure that the people operating your stuff understand not only how to do your stuff, but why they're doing it. So when your stuff breaks, they can still find a way to do it. Like, there's all sorts of these fundamental principles that I think are lost all the time. So what ends up happening is the second you lose your internet connection, everybody just goes home. Okay, I guess we're done commerce for this week,
until somebody else
and
fixes it.
and it's yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've just lost these fundamentals.
Yeah, and I mean, at the core of it is this whole idea of uh, innovation for innovation's sake, or like you can't you can't innovation isn't on a calendar. Innovation isn't on a patch schedule, right? So innovation comes when it's needed, when it's, necessity is the mother of invention, but it comes right when it's needed, and when a real leap and a real jump is absolutely needed in an industry or in a discipline or in a field. Innovation arrives right when it's needed, and I would argue that in between, it's not innovation. It's maybe stabilization, it's maybe optimization, whatever you want to call it. But don't call, patching a system and fixing some security holes innovation. You're just it's status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo, giant leap. Status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo, giant leap. And so, getting people on this trolley of like constantly updating versions and constantly updating to new releases is a little bit of a is a little disingenuous, or I don't know what the right word is for it. It's not really delivering on innovation unless you can demonstrate that what the person had before is appreciably worse than what you're giving them now, and what you're giving them now is just so much better. Yeah,
Yeah, like Windows XP
yeah,
is every bit as
yeah,
good as this operating system that I'm running right now.
yep, yep,
I don't need or want any of the innovations. And there was a 64-bit version of
yep,
Windows XP. So I mean, you can't even say the processor architecture was a necessity for moving to different versions or
yeah.
whatever. And yeah, like it's so anyway, yeah, it's but I don't know, like we I'm the kind of guy who would love to buy like the car that would last for 30
Yep,
years.
me too.
Like the German tank of
Yeah,
vehicles. I would love to buy that. And, all metal. It's similar to like I got the Honda snow thrower, which is all metal,
yeah,
way better than anything you can get at Home Depot, like that plastic thing that's going to break after 3 or 4 years. The Honda is going to be still running in 30
yeah.
years. And and I'd love to buy that vehicle, but society doesn't want it. They want the cheaper throwaway
I,
thing.
I, I think but I think it's back to your empowerment thing. Like I would like my a constant example of this is I would like nothing more than to go half a kilometer down Carling Avenue here in Ottawa to the Ford dealership and give them all my money for a 0 kilometer brand new gleaming 1992 Ford Ranger. 2 door, nothing automatic, windows that you can roll down with your arms, like long bed, like big long bed, nice bed, and the truck would last 1,000 years because they made them kind of well back in the day, and like, but no, like,
Yep.
and yet everybody that I talk to, I'm using the Ford Ranger example. You could just as equally say a '96 Tacoma or something like that. Everybody that I talked to are like, yeah, those were great trucks, man. I would love nothing more than to have my old, '96 Tacoma, and because it was perfect. There was nothing to be improved on it, and it went for 400,000 kilometers before it finally rusted out. Why can't we have that? No, it's this new thing, and you've got to have a giant TV screen in your truck now, and there's got to be a cab for 14 people and no bed. Basically the truck, no carrying capacity. Um, they just wreck everything. Everything has to get wrecked for kind of no good reason. For the sake of moving on and advancing. So
Yeah. So anyway, and I think that does tie back to crowd strikes and in other things, is that it is, like we're just not paying attention to the fundamentals that keep, the shiny side up.
Yeah.
It's, like we fall over every once in a while. We're like, oh yeah, single points of failure, bad. Oh yeah, having electronics where electronics aren't necessary, bad. It's like, oh yeah. But what do we do about it as consumers? Well, it's
I think we need to
look the
figure out
other
how
way
to
until it falls over.
figure out how to organize and speak with your wallets and demand change. Like I can't think of any other thing that's going to work. And I think sadly, individual consumers have kind of lost a belief in that as a way of getting things done. And I think, to your point, inside organizations, people don't feel empowered to make those changes, and something's got to snap and give at a certain point, because this is ultimately a quality issue. It's how do we stop making shitty things?
Mm-hmm.
To your shitification thing. This was we brought in Spinal Tap, we brought in late 80s Tacoma trucks, we talked about CrowdStrike, obviously timely news stuff. We really covered the gamut. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what Steve's gonna title this one. But try to give it something upbeat though, because I feel like we nagged a lot today, but it's we want to identify a bright future. So there's really, some ideas in here.
I really grabbed onto Davy's line where he said, status quo, status quo, status quo, giant leap.
Feels like it.
Yeah.
Feels like it. And like the key to that is it feels like the innovation happens when it's absolutely needed, and only then. That everything else is innovation in disguise, or not really innovation. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think there's a lot of talk that really resonated with me. There's a lot of talk about like innovation that's not really like innovation. Mm-hmm. Like, and like you said, there's this at the start, Davy, like what's the last kind of giant leap since the smartphone? Like, I think for me, I know last episode, we talked a lot about, quantum computing is what you guys think the next kind of like giant leap is. I'd like to see more of a leap in, like, it exists. It's just not really practical. I like to see more from like augmented reality or something like that. Like take the Apple goggles, mm-hmm. but like put that technology into like glasses. The identical glasses that the three of us are all wearing right now. Like, just make it like more accessible. And you think of like, being able to combine this with this, like, and for our listeners,
I think Jason was onto it when, there was a quiet giant leap after smartphones, and they're kind of obviously paired together is the bandwidth stuff and the 5G and beyond, right? So this idea that in the background, the stuff that people definitely lay people definitely don't fully understand is how have we advanced, how much we've advanced our ability to deliver data wirelessly to people from orbit and beyond, right? So that's been the hockey. That's been an absolute hockey stick of growth. So, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's an interesting element to here. We're turning this into the innovation episode part 2, but I think it is a big portion of like true innovation making something accessible to a large audience. I think that's because, again, talking about like the Apple goggles that were apparently all the rage, but it's like a very niche, like small percentage of the population like has those, right? Like, I think the leap in that field for augmented reality is going to be making something less expensive or less cumbersome, like in a way that, like you're talking about like 5G and like the developments on the networks, it's something that everybody now uses, whether they realize it or not. It was like that quiet leap. I think that's a big part of true innovation, is like taking something new, some great idea, but making it like truly accessible to the masses.
Yeah, big time. Love it. See, there we go. We ended up positively. I love it.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Fantastic. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next week.
Great stuff,
awesome.
Guys.
Take care, guys. Yep.
Enterprise Intelligence is a Shiny Docs podcast with Jason Cassidy and Davy Slimman, produced by Stephen Schuntz. Copyright 2024. If you would like to learn more about how Shiny Docs can make it easy to organize your content, protect your data, and make your users happy, visit shinydocs.com today.